Hello, welcome to the episode of the Let People Prosper series. My name is Dr. Vance Ginn. I hope you're having a prosperous day. Well, today is February 23rd, 2023, and I'm delighted to have another freedom fighter and liberty warrior, Representative Chip Roy. Chip, welcome to the Let People Prosper show.
Yeah, Vance, great to be on. Obviously, I love your work. I love, frankly, the title of your podcast. It's exactly what we ought to do in a free society, and God bless you for doing it. Happy to be on.
Well, I appreciate that, Chip. And, we've been friends for a while, and God bless you and your family, too. And for the audience, let me go ahead and go through your bio, and then we can just get right into it. So Representative Chip Roy is a devoted husband and father of two, currently serving his third term in Congress, representing Texas' 21st Congressional District, which includes South Austin, North San Antonio, and the Texas Hill Country. Previously, Representative Roy served as First Assistant Attorney General of Texas under Ken Paxton, Chief of Staff to Senator Ted Cruz, Senior Advisor to Texas Governor Rick Perry, Senate and Judiciary Committee Staff Director under Senator John Cornyn, as a federal prosecutor. So he's had a few jobs looking at policy, and I also worked with him for a while at Texas Public Policy Foundation. Prior to the public sector, he worked for nearly 3 years as an investment banking analyst. Representative Roy holds a BA and MA from the University of Virginia and a JD from the University of Texas. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee, Rules and Budget Committee, and is the policy chair of the House Freedom Caucus. Again, Chip, it's a pleasure to be with you today. And, like I like to do with all my guests is start off with, what motivates you to do what you do?
Vance, as you know, because you've known me for a long time, I was in public service, working in a number of different roles, prosecutor, Senator Cornyn on the Judiciary Committee, Governor Perry, helped him write a book, was working for him, and was diagnosed with cancer. And I came out the other side of that, and I had a then 4-month-old daughter and almost 2-year-old son. By the time I got through cancer, they were a few months older. And I came out of that with a renewed commitment to save this country for our kids and grandkids. I didn't inherit a free country to pass down an unfree one. And that's where we're headed. That's just straight up where we're headed. We are heading into the abyss. We are going to let this republic burn around us unless we fight. This is our Alamo moment. So what motivates me is waking up every single day, making sure the American people understand that we're with them. We believe in them. We believe in freedom. We believe in prosperity. We believe in letting people prosper. We can, in fact, save this country, but we're all going to have to work at it. And that's what motivates me.
Well, and it works so well with what you do every day, Chip. And I've seen you do this for a long time. I mean, it's one of your passions that you really want to do each and every day. This isn't just something that you're trying to make it look good and everything else. I mean, you're fired up on the House floor. This is who Chip Roy is, each and every day. And I think it's really your gift. You had that situation with cancer. You battled it. You came back, and through that entire time, it's been that you've put it to, this is God's gift for you to do these sort of things. And I wonder, battling through some of these things, were there ever times where you felt down, where you were in the bunker, where you weren't going to be able to overcome it, but overcoming those things really helped to give you the guidance of what you needed to do, what you're doing now?
Well, look, I'm always uplifted by people who overcome. I've actually been very blessed in my life. Cancer was a curveball, but I was cancer-free in a couple months. Treatment wasn't fun, but there are a lot of people right now going through a lot worse than I ever went through. And I wouldn't wish upon parents, the parents I saw down at MD Anderson, having to watch their children battle cancer. So I was pretty lucky, and I kind of viewed it that way. I mean, life's going to throw you curveballs. My dad had polio. My grandma lost my grandfather when my dad was 7 years old and had been diagnosed with polio, and he died of cancer. And so what did she do? She didn't crawl up in the corner and give up. She saddled up. She got a couple of jobs. She helped my dad through therapy. She became the first female county clerk elected in Nolan County, Texas. And then her son went on to be the first to go to college. American story. I was the first to go to graduate school, and now here I am in Congress. Every one of us has those stories. That's the American dream. And dadgummit, I'm not going to let the government, through tyranny, interfere with that American dream. I'm going to throw my body in front of that train, and happy to do it.
Amen. Amen. And as you know, Chip, I was also a first-generation college student, went on to graduate school, got a PhD in economics, low-income background as well. And I think, a lot of those dynamics as we're growing up makes us who we are today, to continue to fight, to continue to come over those battles. And that's why I think it's so important, and why I wanted to talk to you about what's going on in D.C. Congress just seems broken to so many people across the United States. My friends and family are asking me all the time, what's going on. I had the pleasure of serving for a year in the Trump administration as chief economist for Office of Management and Budget. And, went through all those budget numbers, and we tried to do some good, but there's only so much you can do with what Congress is doing and the size of the debt that's moving forward. I mean, we're up to $31.4 trillion now. Just net interest on the debt is going to be over $1 trillion here pretty soon. Where do you like to start? Like when you're thinking about the budget and trying to explain to folks that are out there, where do you like to start and talk about it?
Well, there's so many things you can focus on. You can get lost in the weeds. You know that because you worked up there. I think you got to keep it pretty simple. Stop funding tyranny. Stop funding the very things you campaign against. I don't think it's that hard. Yeah, we got to figure out how to deal with so-called mandatory spending, so-called entitlements. I don't like that word. No one's entitled to anything. But people that have built their lives around the promise of Social Security and Medicare payments, we got to honor those commitments because you're supposed to honor your commitments. We can do that, but we're going to have to figure out how to solve this problem. And you start by making a simple promise to the American people. I'm not going to fund with their tax dollars or borrowing, and it's more borrowing than tax dollars these days, the very tyranny that we go out on the campaign trail and criticize. Why would I fund an IRS to go after and audit 5 times more minorities and poor people than rich people? Why would I fund the bureaucrats at the ATF to make felons out of law-abiding citizens for a pistol brace ruling by a bureaucrat? Why would I fund the FBI to make Scott Smith into a domestic terrorist because he went to a school board and defended his daughter who had been assaulted in the schools that he sent her to go get educated in? Why would I fund any of the laundry list of diversity, equity, inclusion, and wokeness being jammed through the federal bureaucracy to teach everybody and force bureaucrats to mandate that we accept the notion that America is evil, that we're somehow a racist and terrible country, and that we need equity and creating results-oriented things instead of freeing up the American people to do what they do best? I could go down the laundry list, but that's the main thing, Vance. And I think it's exactly your point about letting people prosper. You let people prosper by allowing the free market, capitalism, and our diverse 50 states and laboratories of democracy to figure out how to keep excelling and move forward. And that's what we got to get back to.
Well, I agree, Chip. And I think that's so important to think about with what's going on in the states has really got to influence what's happening at the federal level. I mean, Washington, as you know, and talk about often, is broken. The states are the place where these things are happening. And I've seen that. I've called it the responsible state budget revolution, where you have a lot of good spending restraint that's happening across the states in places like Texas, Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, a lot of these places that are doing that. But you're not seeing that in D.C. yet. So we've got to get something to start happening in that direction. But as we're getting into this debt ceiling discussion that's happening right now, and it has been now for a while, Democrats and Republicans, I guess we're talking some. There's some negotiation with President Biden and what's happening there. What's kind of the latest of what you've seen with this debt ceiling fight?
Sure. Let me just say one thing about something you just said, because it's important for people to remember. You did great work. TPPF's done great work working with the state of Texas to stop spending money we don't have here, right? And to make sure we balance our budget appropriately. But keep in mind, states kind of get away with a little bit of a hall pass because the federal government prints money and spends on all manners of things it can't afford. So my message to Texas or even Florida with the great leadership of Ron DeSantis, or certainly a backwards place like California or New York, is you better gird your loins because the federal government, man, there ain't nothing left in the tank. So you think all these great programs with free money coming from the feds is saving your bacon. It ain't. It ain't there anymore. So states need to get ready to be able to figure out how to provide the services they're supposed to provide in our federal republic rather than letting the federal government write blank checks. And then the second point, now to answer your actual question, is that the debt ceiling fight is coming. But it's a little bit much ado about nothing while also being a really important thing. Everybody goes, oh my God, they're going to default. Oh, they're not going to pay our interest on our bonds. That's crazy. It's crazy talk. They have plenty of authority and plenty of revenue to make good on all of the interest payments we need to make good on. This is a fake tense moment created by Democrats who want to cry the sky is falling. But the good news is a lot of the media, even the left mainstream media, is putting out kind of we kind of get the joke. And here's the real important part. We should use this to our advantage. Coming into this summer when everybody's going, oh, the debt ceiling. we can use that to say, hey, why should we borrow money to do any of the things I just talked about a minute ago, Vance? Why should we go borrow $2.6 trillion to fund a Department of Homeland Security to do anything but secure the homeland, to not actually have a secure border? We should demand change. We should demand that the Department of Defense not only stop what they finally stopped because we demanded it in December, that they stop requiring the vaccine mandate. We should demand they reinstate folks, that they not allow them to have their student loans targeted and getting pulled back because they dared to say no to tyranny. We can do those things in the debt ceiling fight. So here's what we're going to do. Simple thing. We're going to demand, as we already got an agreement out of Kevin McCarthy during the speaker's fight, that we return spending to 2022 levels. That's a $150 billion cut across the discretionary spending pot. Our belief is, although we're not going to state what it should be, our belief is you can return non-defense spending, that's the alphabet soup of the bureaucracy, simply to pre-COVID levels, to 2019 pre-COVID spending levels, and then you can maintain defense spending at the 2023 levels we just passed to make sure we can have the resources to beat China as is necessary. But we should demand that it be an unwoke military in the process. We can do all this, and if we do that, we'll save about $3 trillion, give or take. We're still looking at the CBO baseline, which you understand better than I do. About $3 trillion over 10 years if we do that.
Yeah, I think that will be a great start. I mean, this weaponization of government and through all the bureaucracies, it's just another layer, to your point, of tyranny that they're putting on the American people, because these aren't people who, for the most part, love America. These are people who are career bureaucrats who are just pushing papers and ultimately just want a job, right? They want career certainty that they can stay within those jobs. So it just continues to expand. And then they find new ways to go after people, the American people as a whole, for whether it be the IRS or other places. We continue to see that. So I think you're exactly right. And your first point, though, is really important. It's something that I advise a lot of the state legislators and other folks across the nation, is that the day is coming. The day of reckoning is coming for the Congress to roll back their spending. And they need to do it now, right, in order for us to have a fiscal sanity, to have fiscal solvency for the future. And one of the first places that they're going to turn is to the states, to start to rein in some of their spending at the end of the day. And that will allow for states to be more independent. I mean, the states have given away a lot of dependence through all of the red tape, the rules, and everything else that's put on them by these federal funds. And Chip, over the last 3 years, including the last year of the Trump administration, there was a massive amount of money that was sent out to the states that the states, I hope, will not become dependent on. They likely will. And this is going to create a lot of other problems, not only at the federal level, but also at the state level. Whenever we're seeing some of these dollars, I know here in Texas, they separated all that out and put it in a whole nother article of the budget. So that way it doesn't commingle with all the other funds, but it will to some extent, because some people will say, well, hey, you're spending X plus Y is with all these federal funds. We need to keep spending at that baseline level moving forward, not based on the X before. And we're going to get hammered for this moving forward. And so it's something I think we've got to continue to that message moving forward. And along with that, find ways to keep cutting spending, which I know you've been working on this a long time, Chip, in DC, and it's so difficult to do. You and I have talked some about spending limits. I'm a big fan of spending limits, putting in population inflation, something that's starting to slow the growth rate of spending. But at the end of the day, that's not going to solve a lot of these fiscal problems we have today if we don't start, cutting. How else can we really get this going towards cutting? I know the Budget Control Act of 2011 was a good one. There was some restraint that was put in place, but with the CBO, even with their with their rosy scenarios, their poor forecast for the future, they're still showing nearly $2 trillion in national, just the deficit year after year after year. What else can we really do to start to turn the tide of this ship that's about to wreck?
Again, I try to keep things as simple as I can. You and I and the rest of us who are kind of policy nerds can get wrapped around the axle pretty easily and get wonky about it. And that's not a criticism. It's who we are. We focus on it every day. It's our job. We're supposed to do that. But I try to distill it to something more simple. And in this context, what I started with earlier about not spending money that we don't have, right? That's just a simple concept. And you start by earning the trust of the American people that we will address the hard questions dealing with some of the mandatory spending, so-called mandatory spending, that it takes this out of our annual budget. No house operates that way. No business operates that way. We need to earn the respect and the belief of the American people that we're serious about this. But I, in no way, shape, or form, can look in the eye of any American, rich, middle class, poor, black, white, brown, whatever. I can't look at someone and say, we're going to reform Social Security and Medicare. And I start talking about means testing and ages and other things. I can't talk about Medicaid reform and about what we're going to do with healthcare payments in the complex post-Obamacare world. If I'm funding a diversity, equity, and inclusion office at the Department of Defense that is undermining our ability to recruit men and women to defend our country, if we're telling the Border Patrol they can't actually do their job because they can't actually apply the law because Biden is saying, just release folks, right, in Mayorkas. I can't look them in the eye if I'm simultaneously funding the FBI to go after Mark Houck in Philadelphia because he dared to go defend his son in front of an abortion clinic exercising his First Amendment rights, and they had a SWAT team bust down his door. How can I go talk to a little old guy or little old lady and say, yeah, don't worry, trust us, we'll reform Medicare? That's crazy talk. So let's go earn the respect of the American people by saving $3 trillion over 10 years by blowing up the woke, weaponized federal bureaucracy that's at war with the American people, and importantly for your purposes, at war with prosperity, right? I've got eggheads like Brian Rydell with the Manhattan Institute in D.C. running around telling everybody, you got to focus on mandatory. These guys are crazy. And they're assuming economic growth of 3 or 3.5%. That's twice what we've had. Well, why accept that premise? Why shouldn't we have the 4 and 4.5% economic growth of Reagan and Clinton era America? We can have that if you get rid of the climate fetish regulations, shutting down oil and gas and our natural strength of having strong energy in this country. So we should have strong growth. That's the big thing. Cut the federal bureaucracy and then earn the respect of the American people to go to reform those other spending programs that are more sensitive, but that we're going to have the respect of the people to go tackle for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I think that's so important about the growth. I mean, we've got to get growth growing again. Today, February 23rd, the second estimate for the fourth quarter GDP numbers came out by Bureau of Economic Analysis, and they showed that from Q4 2021 to Q4 2022, the advanced estimate was 1% growth. Well, they revised that lower to only 0.9%, 0.9% from Q4 2021 to Q4 2022. That's the slowest growth on a recovery, I'm using air quotes right now, recovery period since 2009, which was still in the Great Recession. So this is very slow growth. This is something that's unsustainable, and it's the reason why we're going to continue to run massive deficits if we spend the way that we are. I think that you bring up some really good points about the discretionary versus mandatory spending. The mandatory spending is the part that's growing the fastest, right? Yep. So we do need to get control of that at some point. But there are key concerns, political things as well, that you've got to be able to consider when you're looking at the entire debate that's happening right now. And I think it is a reason why we need a spending limit, something that can restrain the growth of government over time. For example, Chip, of the last 20 years, there's been about $20 trillion in national debt that's been added. If we had just matched, spending with population and inflation over that period, instead of $20 trillion national debt, it would have been about a $1 trillion surplus. We could have been actually buying down the debt by just limiting the growth rate of spending. So we've got to get somewhere. We got to start somewhere, because the other thing too, Chip, is that this all matters to growth. Because the more debt that we issue, not only does it crowd out the rest of the budget. If we're spending $1 trillion on net interest on the debt, we can't spend on anything else, whether it's national defense or Medicaid or anything else within the budget. But also means we're going to issue more debt treasury securities that the Fed is likely just going to print and create more inflation, which raises all of our taxes in the process and slows out and crowds out the economy. It's a pretty equal way to go around it. And so, yeah, go ahead.
So that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
You and I have talked about this this at length, right? And so the people listening to your podcast here, our friends in the legislature or members of Congress, I absolutely agree that we should put some spending caps in place. And I'm still looking at some of the ideas you and I have been batting around for probably 2 years or more. But here's the problem. The feds can print money, and whatever law they adopt, whatever rule they adopt, they're also going to adopt an exception for national security, an exception for whatever, national emergencies, right? Hardly any abuse under national emergencies, huh? So what will happen is they'll just blow the lid off of spending because they can print money. The problem, and that's a little different than the state budgets, right? And you know that, and I know that. That's the problem. Basically, what we're trying to tell people is be an adult, be a leader, stand up and make the hard decisions. Look, I'm very sympathetic to my colleagues who say, Chip, we have to address Social Security, Medicare, and all of the mandatory spending. And to them, I say, I agree, but we have to earn the right to do so. And that means stop spending money on stupid and then go do that. I'm with you on putting caps in place because you can use it as a message to shame politicians for violating it under their ridiculous modern monetary theory policies or whatever they're buying into, that they can just print money endlessly. But we have to earn all of that. That's why this year's fight, we already got an agreement from Speaker McCarthy that we will cut spending to 2022 levels. It's $150 billion. We got an agreement that we would work to come up with a 10-year balanced budget, even though that's hard. That will require us to deal with mandatory spending. So we're working through that right now to be responsible. I would just tell all my colleagues, you got to walk before you can run. And the first step is slash the federal bureaucracy, figure out how to make defense actually focus on lethal force to go kill bad guys and blow stuff up rather than teaching people not to say sir and ma'am in the Marine Corps, whatever the hell they're doing right now. And then zero in and, through commissions, through caps, maybe it's a cap on a GDP to debt ratio basis or a percent of GDP that you're allowed to spend or tax from. Maybe it's a growth plus population cap like you and I've talked about. There are a number of different approaches to put brakes in place and make us do our job, but there's no substitute for men and women who will actually do their damn job.
No, that's right. And people need jobs across the country. And the more that the federal government spends, the more it's going to crowd out the productive private sector. One of the things that I think is not brought up enough, Chip, is that cutting spending is pro-growth. Cutting taxes is pro-growth, but cutting spending is pro-growth. The real problem of government is not by how much it taxes, but by how much it spends. And so we forget that oftentimes because we're like, oh, well, government spending goes into the Keynesian multiplier equation and it's included in GDP. But who does that? That's Keynesians. That's not us who believe in pro-growth and supply side reforms and free markets, because the more the government spends, the more that it's crowding out our way of life and our liberty and everything else.
Well, importantly, when they print money, right? My good friend Thomas Massey, I know you respect a lot. Thomas tweeted out this morning, go look at his Twitter feed, a great point about, look, we're either taxing you and taking your money, or we're printing money, which is inflating things and making the value of your already hard-earned dollars lower. We're making them worth less, or we're borrowing money for the future generations, i.e. you and your kids and grandkids, to have to pay. So all of those things are a tax. But yet we used to run against Democrats as tax and spend liberals. But now what we do is we just say, well, we're Republicans and Democrats. We're just different versions of spend and spend statists. And that's the truth. Republicans, you got to look in the mirror, man.
Yep. No, that's exactly right. Well, here as we're wrapping up, Chip, what else would you want to say to the American people and members of the state legislature and Congress and others as we wrap up here?
America's only going to be saved if Texas is strong. So if you're a Texas legislator, or if you're a Texan, make sure the Texas legislature this year fights for you. We need to, make sure that Texas is as strong as it can be. And then ultimately have faith. Look, there's a revival going on in this country, both literally a revival as we're seeing happening in Kentucky and Asbury and what's happening with 24 hours of prayer for now, like almost 3 weeks. But there's also an economic and freedom revival going on with a new generation of Americans who are recognizing they just want to be able to live free and go prosper. And we need leaders who will advance that cause. And you got a big group who's willing to do it. The 20 of us that locked arms together to force change in the House of Representatives about a month ago. We're locking our arms together right now to go fight for freedom and to go fight for getting our fiscal house in order and getting the federal government out of the way. So stand with us. Go talk to your friends and family at the dinner tables, and don't let your kids, don't turn them over to the deep state of the educators to tell them that America's evil. America's great. Let's go win it and save it for them.
Amen, Chip. And I really appreciate you being on the Let People Prosper show. You know, I think we've seen the school choice revolution. We've seen the flat tax revolution. I hope we see a responsible budget revolution. These are things that are going to leave more money in families' pockets so that they can prosper and do all the things that they want to do to meet their unique needs instead of being dependent on government, because we know that hasn't turned out very well. So God bless you, Chip, and your family. And thank you for all that you do for Americans and for America. We need the fiscal sanity that's in your brain to start happening there in D.C. We really do. And so for all the audience, you know, please leave us a 5-star rating. You can find the show notes at vanceginn.com or vanceginn.substack.com. Thank you for joining us. Let people prosper.